We are live. Happy Tuesday, you guys. How are you? Come on in. When you come on in, let us know where you're tuning in from. I am back with the amazing Kaytee Gillis. So come on in and say hello.
Hey y'all.
Hey, hey. So I'm just going to do a little housekeeping, share it to a couple of places, and then I will be right back. When you jump in, let us know where you're tuning in from so that we can say hey. 2 minutes. We're going to get started. Hey, you guys. Hey, hey, come on in. How are you? It's good to see you. Let us know where you're tuning in from when you jump in. I'm just sharing to a couple of pages and then we're going to get started. I'm excited about tonight. I'm always excited when I have Kaytee on because she's amazing. So, yeah, I'm excited to get started. So, today we are talking about post separation abuse. Now, Kaytee, we have been connected for a few years now. And we were
Yeah.
earlier, we were like, okay, first of all, introduce yourself before I get talking.
So I'm Kaytee. I'm Kaytee Gillis. I'm a psychotherapist, author, writer, blogger, bunch of things. And I focus on post-separation abuse and relationship trauma and family trauma.
Awesome. She's amazing. And we've been working together for a few years now. And one of the things we're talking about is like a few years ago, post separation abuse wasn't really like a topic.
Like wasn't a phrase that you heard people say. I remember when I wrote my first book, I came across the phrase post-separation abuse. And I was like, oh, that makes sense. Like it's post the separation, the abuse happens.
Right.
So that makes sense, but it was like a foreign phrase to me, even though it was essentially what I was describing in my book. But I just didn't have like the name for it that was big. And that was in 2021. So, I mean, look at how far we've come in 2 years, a year and a half.
Yeah. And it's a thing now. If you Googled it, it's actually a thing.
Oh, it's like,
yeah. And you deal with clients. I deal with clients that have survived abuse. And this is a thing. And so I thought it was really important to bring this conversation to the table. You just wrote a book on it. Can you show them the book real quick? We're going to go into detail. Yep. So you have wrote a book. It's not high conflict. So tell me, why did you come up with that name? It's not high conflict.
So the thing is in the court system, anyone who's been through the court system and who's gone through a divorce, anyone who's gone through like any kind of traumatic relationship where you're gone through the court system, and not necessarily just the court system, anytime the legal system is involved, what happens is both members of the party, both members of the couple get, kind of like shared blame, and everything from law enforcement to courts. And I always like say it's a systemic issue. I'm not kind of pointing the blame at any particular person. But it is systemic that both members of the party are referred to as both having shared blame. So it's like, it's a high conflict divorce. You'll hear that a lot, a high conflict breakup or a bad breakup or a, dramatic breakup. And I'm not trying to say that like bad breakups don't happen where there's people kind of doing stuff on both sides that's dramatic, but I'm talking about when when it's abuse. And so I came up with, it's not high conflict, it's post-separation abuse, like just as a way of saying like, no, we need to call it what it is, just to give the blame to the people who are doing the action.
I love that. Call it what it is. Let's put the blame where it belongs. And that's on the abuser, because when you say high conflict, it's both people. It's high conflict situation. That's not the case. And
it's like two people having a personality conflict. That's not what it is.
Exactly. Two people arguing, two people fighting. They just can't get along. It's about the money. It's about the children, when in fact, it's nothing like that. It has nothing to do with that. And so I love that you wrote it. So I was like, Kaytee, could you come on and let's talk about this thing? Because we see it every day in the work that we do. So I think, hey, Anna, hey, when you guys pop in, let us know where you're tuning in from so we can say hey. And I think one of the things that I like that you recognize and acknowledge that it's not high conflict. And I think as survivors, it gives such a sense of relief that, listen, it's not high conflict. I am not being high conflict. I'm not being argumentative. I just need to be heard.
I'm just trying to be left alone. And that's,
and abuse is not going to leave you alone. And so now that we know that this is a thing, right? Post-separation is abuse. So can you just tell us, what is post-separation abuse?
All right. So post-separation abuse, I mean, quite literally, it's the abuse that happens after the relationship ends. And so what ends up happening is when a relationship ends, and usually it's an abusive relationship, but not always, maybe there's, some unhealthy traits or dysfunctional traits or whatever, but the relationship ends and then the person feels, maybe they feel wronged. Usually what ends up happening is they feel wronged somehow. How dare you leave me? How dare you move on? How dare you? How dare you? You're going to pay for this. And so how you're going to pay for it is like, I will drag you through the courts. I refuse to divorce you, refuse to let you see your children, or like, basically there's like, hundreds of things that they could do. And so it's basically all of the same ways that domestic abuse takes place in a relationship, but it's post the ending of the relationship. And the reason why that is so important is because we have this idea in our society. Really it's societal. Really, I think it's probably worldwide. We have this idea that when an abusive relationship ends, that it's done. Right. And so you'll hear people say, well, why didn't she just leave? Or why didn't they just leave? Because sometimes leaving is the hardest thing. Sometimes when you leave, it's 10 times worse after you leave. And so the post-separation aspect is so crucial, because while the relationship is going on, if the victim is like, okay, this is what's going on, I'm being tormented, I'm being treated this way, people are sometimes more likely to believe them and say, okay, well, maybe you should leave, or maybe, we should talk about like how to support you. But for some reason, when the relationship ends, it's almost like society, and again, it's a societal issue. I'm not trying to like point fingers, but everything from like laws and are set up to not protect the people who are like, I just want help. Like, I'm just trying to move on with my life, and this person is tormenting me just for leaving.
Yeah, and it's like you said, when they leave the relationship, people say, "Oh, everything's fine now. You should be better." What are you talking about?
Like, and why are you complaining? Just move away. Just move on.
The whole hellhole has opened up once you leave the relationship, because the abuser, it's like they've lost their property. Like, how dare you leave them, or how dare you decide to be free without them? And it's like, oh, I'm going to make your life hell. Yep. But then in the court, what it is. Literally what they do. And the courts are like, oh my goodness, they're always arguing about this and that. And I love how you talk about it. Exactly. I love how you talk about it in your book. Like, even one of the scenarios where, and I'm not going to talk too much, but I'm going to say like the abuser like took her to court for like a ring, like an engagement, a ring.
Yes.
Literally. And it's like, do you really want the ring back, or are you just trying to bring me in court all over again, over and over?
So it's actually like, so that part of my book, so everything in my book is like this case vignette of like this fake character that, doesn't exist, but her story is the same story that so many of us have been through. But the engagement ring thing actually happened to me. That is the one part of the book that is like a true thing. And so that happened to me. So it's interesting, because I was like, truth is stranger than fiction. You can't make that up. So I was like, oh, I'm going to put that in my book. But everything else is, like she's getting taken to court for like the kids' like school fees, or stuff like that. Like he's Catholic, insists that the kid go to a Catholic school, and then the second relationship ends. Oh, I'm not paying the school fees anymore at this Catholic school that I demanded he go to. So it's just, stuff like that. So like being sued for engagement rings, being sued for like the snow tires on the car that the person, forgot at your house, and then now you're being dragged to court for like the snow tires. It's stuff like that happens every day to clients I work with, every day. And they're just like
crazy. Yeah,
they're like pulling their hair out. Like, I just want this person to go away.
Yeah, that's so, and I didn't even know that. Thank you for sharing that. I didn't even know that was personal for you. I didn't realize that. And I'm reading the story. I'm like, you don't even want the ring. Look how much time has passed. What are you doing? What
this stupid ring?
It's so crazy. And it's just the tip of the iceberg of what survivors go through after they escape. So what can it look like? I know we talked a little bit about what it is, but what can that post-separation abuse look like for someone who's escaped abuse?
So the thing is that I always like to kind of remind people that like the basis of our laws is that anyone has the ability to, file lawsuits, file motions, file complaints, and things like that. So basically anything that can be used in that way is usually used. It doesn't mean that every person is going to use every tactic, but things like stalking, things like filing complaints to DCFS is a really common, Department of Child and Family Services, whatever state you all are in. That's a common one, like filing false complaints to the medical board for a lot of my clients and things like that. And so it's basically like any tool that they can use to get at you. You're no longer living with them usually, and you're no longer in the relationship with them. So they're not going to, walk up to you and put their hands on you. Maybe they are, but ideally, they know, okay, there's a line kind of drawn somewhere, and they're not going to necessarily walk up to you and put their hands on you, because that would be honestly sometimes doing you a favor, because it'd get you your protection order maybe. But what ends up happening is they end up using all these other things that are kind of like blurring the line of illegal. I mean, it's technically illegal to stalk someone and follow them around, but you then have to prove it, so all these different things like that are basically like ways to really just like destroy your year, destroy your day, destroy your time. Like they're going to try to really pay back, or like get payback, get retaliation for anything that they feel like if they can make your life like a living hell, then they're going to try to do it in whatever way, just to remind you, who's in control and make you sorry for really ever wanting to leave.
It's infuriating because you find the strength to leave, you leave, and then they start with the post-separation abuse. And it's so interesting if you even look at it like, I remember when I escaped, it was like, I'm not buying diapers for the children. I'm not giving you money to do this and this. I'm like, are you kidding me? So then I have to figure out what that looks like or how to do it myself,
Yes, that's so common. It's like, or I have so many clients where their ex will send the kids back with no jackets, no, and I most of my clients are in the north where it's cold. Well, so it's like, no jackets, no boots. It's like a big deal.
Yeah.
And I just didn't feel like putting them on the kid, or I just didn't feel like putting them in the car. And so then now, she has to go out to Walmart at midnight to like get coats so the kid can go to daycare tomorrow. And it's just stuff like that where it's like in isolation, like that one thing sounds like two people being petty, but it's not. It is like time after time after time where it's the pettiness times 10. So it's like you're dealing with an adult toddler who has the intellect and has the financial funds and the financial means and the platform to really just, take you through like a legal hellhole.
Yeah, I really love how you said that. All the different steps, like the goal is to intentionally harass you.
Yes.
And like I could say, okay, Your Honor, he wouldn't buy diapers, right? And the judge is like, you guys are bringing this to me, but no, Your Honor, he wouldn't buy diapers, but he also didn't do this, and it wasn't this, and then you just look like you're going back and forth over arguments. It does, but there's so much more, and I feel like as survivors, it's so difficult for our voices to be heard in situations like this, because even saying it out loud sounds silly. If we're going to talk about, know what I mean, diapers or a ring,
it sounds like you're being petty.
It sounds like you're being petty.
It sounds like you're being petty. Like, oh, well, they didn't come home with jackets on, and then the police or the judge or whoever it is you're filing, they're going, okay, I don't have time for this. Like, I'm dealing with bigger problems on my docket, and like, and I deal with that all the time with like judges in the courtroom that are like, I don't have time for this.
Yeah,
you don't have time for like a high conflict.
It's really hard for a survivor, because at what point do you find your voice? At what point are you able to say, no, this is not okay, and this is what's happening to me? When are you ever given that platform in front of the people who matter, like the judges or the police, to be able to say, this is what's happening to me. This is abuse. It may be happening outside of the relationship, but nonetheless, it's abuse, And
I sometimes they don't.
Yeah, and I hope that as time goes on, that with the work that you're doing with psychology today, through the book and other avenues, that people are really going to recognize this for what it is, and really allow survivors. Like, this is the thing. It's not about a ring, but if you look back at the history of the relationship, you recognize it's something else. Like, look at the whole picture. Don't look at the diapers, right? Look at the whole picture.
Yeah, it's really the whole picture. And that's what I'll say, like when I'm working with attorneys, working with judges, and working with clients, like you have to really see the bigger picture. This isn't about, if this was a one-time thing that the kids came home with no jackets for school the next day, I highly doubt the person would drag themselves and take off time from work to file a motion. Or maybe they didn't file the motion. Maybe they're on the receiving end of motions. And, you really have to look at the bigger picture of like the goal behind a person's behavior.
Right.
What is going on? Is the goal to it's almost really like you're dealing with, an adolescent. Like, I'm going to be petty, like just to be petty. And then, but the pettiness is more than a headache. Sometimes it's your livelihood. It's your children. It's your family, your happiness, your safety. But it seems petty to the court. So when I'm working with clients, we work on ways to focus on how to present yourself and because you're right. Many times people don't get a chance. You might get 45 seconds in front of a judge. And if you're talking about coats and this and that, and the judge is like, I don't have time for this. And so maybe they'll dismiss both of you. But then that opens up the door for you to then have more stuff because it's
Oh,
not.
yeah, you're going to continue the abuse.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And I want to kind of, when you kind of go through some points a little bit later as we move forward as to what some tips and some tricks and stuff, the tools and tips that people can use. But when you're talking to, well, first of all, what got you interested in this? Is it because you just saw it happening so much?
So I actually went through it. So I always tell people, like, I don't have children. I know I use that example a lot. I don't have children, so I don't speak from personal experience from that aspect, but I did go through it, and I went through it during the pandemic, and I was just trying, please, someone help me. I mean, it was like lawyers and judges and everything. And people were like, people kept saying to me the same thing, like judges, lawyers kept saying, I see what's going on, and I'm sorry you're going through it, but legally there's nothing I can do. And I kept hearing that. The judges would say, I can't stop their right to file motions. I can't stop this. I can't stop that. And I understand it from a logical standpoint. Their hands are tied. But so I went through that myself. And then I realized that after I went through it, I had so many clients who started going through it. And so many people started, kind of seeking me out because of my expertise in this, because you're right. 2 years ago, post-separation abuse was like, what does that mean?
What is that?
And so, I mean, people now seek me out to consult about it and things like that, because it's just something that it really is. If you don't understand what's going on, it can be easy to really overlook and dismiss it, which is it's a safety issue because it follows that pattern of domestic violence.
That's interesting that you talk about it being a safety issue too, because it is. And even in the book, you talk a little bit about how there's court fees that we're responsible for paying.
Yes.
Work, all of these things, child care, back and forth, bring the kids to court with you, leave the court. It's all these things that the survivor is responsible for as well.
And it's not fair. And that in itself is abusive, because then the survivor's like, if you're faced with if you're served with a frivolous lawsuit, if you're served with a subpoena for child custody, you legally have to respond. You can't just be like, oh, I'm going to throw that aside and not think of it. You legally have to respond, which means that you're either doing it yourself, which most of us aren't lawyers. I'm not a lawyer. Right. And, and this paperwork is purposefully written in a way that nobody understands. Yeah. We don't speak legalese. And so then you have to go and hire someone, to respond for you and to help you fight it. And it's just stuff that you shouldn't have to do. And it's a way of I'm not going to go up and I'm not going to put my hands on you because I know I'll be, arrested for that. But instead, I'm going to do all this stuff that's legal that is going to torment you the same way.
And it's so crazy too, because when I think about it, it's what is the solution to that? It's what is the way for that to change?
I know,
because we're still struggling to educate judges and lawyers on what domestic violence is in the first place, right? So now you have this.
I know. I think it's hard because I just did a podcast on this yesterday. It's so hard to train judges because there's generational differences. Most judges I work with are generations older than me. Not all of them. We've seen some younger ones lately, but and so there's a generational difference. They don't want this young woman talking to them. And also I'm not in with the in crowd. I'm not a judge. And just like us as therapists, I don't want someone talking to me who's not a therapist. You don't have any idea what I do every day. And so I get that. Yeah. But they do need understanding of what's going on because it's not their field. Just like it's not my job to rule in the law. It's not, they don't know what they're seeing. And sometimes it is really confusing because it does look like, he said, she said, and judges will literally say to me, it looks like he said, she said, I don't know what to do. And then they'll say to me, I can't give someone a citation for being a jerk. I can't. And I understand that. So I do think, there's been a lot of movements about ways to change it. I have, I've spoken with different reporters and things like that who have, talked about ways of maybe, charging the person who brings frivolous lawsuits with the court fees. That's been one thing that has been used in some other states. Mm-hmm. But what ends up happening, and I talk about this in my book, is what ends up happening is just because you get a judgment against you for your legal fees, that doesn't mean anything. most of us know with judgments, no check is going to arrive the next day. You're
Right.
still out all the money that got you there. And then they can just file an appeal and you're not going to see the money.
Never pay.
So I don't know.
I think that's the hardest thing because, for survivors, we want to say, well, leave, escape. You can get out of the situation.
It's harder.
Yeah, I'm out, but now my partner's giving me hell. They're taking me to court all the time.
Yeah.
They're fighting for custody of the kids, and I know they don't even want the kids this much. They just, and so it's just never.
Kids are being used as a pawn and a weapon, and I do want to tell people, like, I'm definitely not advocating against leaving. I mean, leave if there's any kind of abuse, anything like, absolutely. Nothing is worth your life and your safety. But I mean, I understand, like, sometimes when people leave, they're like, wow, like, it was easier to deal with, like, the stuff I knew and the stuff I could expect versus like the fresh stuff, the new stuff.
Yeah, and that's so hard, because I think that, as survivors and therapists, we're like, we want you to get to safety. We want you to leave. But we're not ignorant to the fact of that it's going to be hard. It's an uphill battle. We know that. And it's like, and we're always going to say your safety is the number one thing. It's the most important thing. But we want to be honest as what it could look like on the other side. Now, it doesn't always happen. Post-separation abuse does not happen in every relationship.
Absolutely.
High extent in every relationship, but it does happen. And so we want you to know what it looks like so that when this stuff is happening to you, you're like, what is going on? Now that it's a buzzword, kind of this now it's like, okay, well, this thing does actually happen. So I don't know if you guys knew that there is a post-separation abuse wheel. I don't know if I can. Here you go.
Yep.
You can look up. It is a post-separation abuse wheel. And some of the things are using the children to get back. So let's talk about that for a second. Using the children to weaponize, using it as a weapon against the other parent. Overstaying their time, not providing for them, refusing to pay child support, telling the children one story, then sending them back with another, all this kind of stuff that kind of goes back and forth. So what do you think about that when it comes to post-separation abuse with children involved?
So that's always something that I tell people, hope for the best, but prepare for the worst. Like, prepare to best empower yourself for the situation, because we want to hope that people won't act like that people won't use, human beings and living things and children as pawns, but it does happen. And so there are ways that you can empower yourself, such as, documenting things and just being mindful of what it is that you say, because they are going to be talking badly about you to the children, which is sad, but they will. And so sometimes you'll have kids that will come back, like my clients will say, like, Kaytee, like my daughter comes back and she's so angry with me because she's telling me, like, dad said that you did this and then dad said you did that. And we have to work on, like, you can't fight through the child. And I can't even imagine what that's like. I'm not trying to say that it's going to be easy, but you can't then say to your daughter, no, dad did this, because then you're feeding into it. Even though he was the instigator, you can't feed into that. So, just like, okay, I'm sorry you had to hear stuff like that when you were home with your dad. Like, that must have been really uncomfortable to be hearing that kind of stuff. Do you still want pizza or tacos? We could talk some more about this. Like, keep it to the focus on the behavior and not a character assassination, because children do not want to be in the middle of two parents having any kind of character assassination. And I understand, like, clients will say to me, well, that's not fair. So I'm supposed to just sit there and listen to, like, them, bash me, and I'm not supposed to say anything. Yeah. And that is, I get it. I understand. You do have to almost, like, take the high road. And I like to think that eventually people will see, but I'm not saying it's going to be easy. I'm not saying it happens quickly. And I'm not saying just not saying it's easy. Yeah.
It sucks too, because as survivors, we're always like, have to take the high road or not fight back in the same weapons that they fight with,
I know. You can't fight back with the same weapons they fight with. I like that.
Yeah,
I like that.
This part talks about, on the post-separation abuse will discarding, the unhealthy parent will wage a war for 50% parenting time. Yes. Their interest is not honorable. It's not in the children, but it's so that they can win, like, in court. Like, it's a win. It's a win. It's a control thing.
It's a control thing, yeah. Mm-hmm. And sometimes it's money. Like, sometimes, like, I've consulted with lawyers whose clients were like, oh, I just want 50% because I can't afford to pay, $2,000 a month child support. So if I have 50%, then, I don't have to pay that, or I only have to pay X, Y, Z, or whatever. And lawyers are like, I see that this person's a jerk, but I still legally have to support. I mean, everyone deserves due process, and everyone deserves, our judicial system gives people, legal support for their jerkness. I mean, we know that, and it's sad, but.
And the kids are being used as pawns. Oh, they don't want to pay child support, so let me get 50%. And you're thinking 50%, like you didn't take care of the kids when I lived in the house. Now you want
at all.
Yeah.
And I talk about that in my book, where Rory, she keeps getting sucked back into court for different child custody. And that is something that my clients deal with every day, where it's like every time they think, okay, good, we have 50-50 or we have 60-40 or whatever, things are good. Then they'll call me, Kaytee, they're taking me back to court because, I changed my schedule at work and I'm making more money, and they're upset that I'm making more money. So they want to change schedules. So that way, just another way to just stick it to you.
Yeah. And that's so hard. Kaytee, I think one of the most difficult things even having this conversation is that we don't necessarily have a solution more than we have, like, you have to educate yourself and you have to empower yourself with the knowledge that this is a thing and that you can be equipped to handle it in the best way possible. Yeah. So another thing they use is like the legal abuse. We talked about that, constantly taking them back to court. And then financial abuse, right?
Yes.
They know oftentimes the abusers have a lot more money. And so they're constantly bringing you back into court, knowing you have to work, knowing you have to pay childcare, but going with the back and forth.
Yeah, it's a back and forth. And then it's also things like, especially if you're still legally married to the person, or if you have any kind of financial ties or like business ties, it's, like bringing up all kinds of debt and then being like, oh, so here's your $40,000 or $50,000 in credit card debt and you can't control it because the person actively has the card and you can't just go take it from them. So I work with my clients on ways to empower themselves with that. Of course, if you're still legally married, I would seek legal advice. But if you're not legally married, or if you're legally allowed to do so, make sure you cut access to credit cards, take them off of your banking, remove any kind of access, revoke access to things, remove passwords, change passwords, just because you never know. I mean, the thing that you don't even think about, like I had a client who forgot that they had a shared Uber account. And next thing she knows is she had $600 in Uber charges because they just were like, oh, well, this is her credit card on the Uber account. So I'm just going to not use my car and just kind of take a break for a week and just Uber everywhere. So she had like $600 in Uber charges for a week and there's nothing she could do, so.
It's so crazy. And it's so interesting to think, like, it forces us to think outside of the box as survivors, or what could they possibly do? Like you said, I like what you said. Hope for the best, but prepare for the worst.
Prepare for the worst, yeah. Like
prepare for the worst. It's wisdom, honestly. Because to think that just because you leave that it's over, or just because you leave they're going to be okay with it and move on, that's just not the case most of the time. So be prepared, be prepared. So when we talk about some of the tips and tools that you would give advice to a survivor who's experiencing post-separation abuse, preparing to leave, and is afraid of post-separation abuse, what are some of those things?
So I have two big things that I like to tell people, and they're both acronyms. Number one is NEB, NEB, and it's a NEB communication technique, and it's N is for necessary, E is for emotionless, and B is for brief. So this is all of your communication: necessary, emotionless, and brief. And so when they're talking to you, because they're going to try to, unless there's any kind of protection order or they've been advised not to talk to you, they're probably going to be trying to incite you through like text messages, emails, anything like that. So the first thing is necessary. So don't respond unless it's necessary. So let's say that they're texting you like, oh, I saw a Facebook picture and you look horrible in red. You shouldn't have worn that red shirt. That's not necessary to respond to. If it's okay, little Billy got sick at school today and you need to pick him up, that's different. You need to respond to that. E is for emotionless. All of your responses should be emotionless, which I realize is difficult, if not impossible. I'm not telling you to be emotionless. I'm telling you your response to be emotionless.
Very different. Yeah.
Yes, I'm on my way to pick him up. That's it. You don't be like, oh, I'm so upset that he gets sick and they knew it was going to happen because you gave him ice cream when I told you not to give him ice cream. Don't get into all that. Even though you're right, but call your mom on the way to go get him, or call your sister on the way to go get him. Don't respond to it. B is brief. And this is really important because the more you say, the more that can be used against you, and the more they're going to pick and pinpoint, you kind of like pick at different things that you say. So just brief, like, okay, I'll be there at 4. And then the second thing is nap. And that's an easy word to remember because we all love to nap. NAP is never assess patterns. And this is when you're going through, it's especially important for my clients who are going through any kind of litigation abuse or any kind of like legal thing, because when you're standing in court and you have your 45 seconds in front of the judge, do not get up there and assign diagnostic labels. Do not get up there and say, oh, she's an abusive jerk or he's an abusive alcoholic. Judges don't care about that. They don't have time for that. They don't have time for allegations because they don't know what's a lie, what's the truth. So don't get up there and say, he's a narcissist, she's an alcoholic. Don't do it. Focus on behavior. So focus on, he's giving my kid ice cream, even though he's lactose intolerant. Here were the 3 days that happened. This is the medical record of when we had to go to the ER. Behavior, focusing on behavior. And of course, I always have to give the disclaimer. I'm not giving legal advice. I'm giving advice as to how to manage your, mental health as you're dealing with the situation. Because if you get up there and you start saying, he's a narcissist and stuff like that, and you might be right, maybe they are a narcissist, but when you get up there and you start doing that and then they do it back to you, you're going to be in this thing of quicksand. And I'm trying to help you, try to stay out of the quicksand.
Yeah, that was really good. So I'm going to go back to your NEB, the necessary emotion, listen, breathe. And so oftentimes abusers will try to get you in this tug of war kind of conversation. They want you to respond. They want you to. They want this back and forth. And what burns them, what kills them is, okay, 4 o'clock. Thank you. Okay.
Yep.
Because they're not used to that. We emote where they're used to us crying and being hysterical and going back and forth. And it's a way, to take your power back.
Take your power back. Yeah.
It is a huge way to take your power back. Necessary? Is it necessary? No, it's not necessary to respond because X, Y, Z. Is it about the children or a necessary conversation about the legal or the finances? Then respond. Keep it emotionless and breathe. Now, I'm not saying, like you said it perfectly. Like, you can be emotional.
You can be emotional. You're going to be emotional. Call your mom. Yep. Call your cousin, whatever. And I always tell people, unless you have children, unless you have any kind of shared business assets where you have to be communicating, just don't communicate at all.
Yeah.
That's probably the better thing. But yeah, necessary emotionless.
So let's talk about that for a second too, because I know, sometimes you don't have kids together and you just need to cut it off. But they will take any opportunity, any second that they can to jump in there and get your attention. Our favorite song played on the radio today. Oh my, happy birthday. Your grandma's birthday was yesterday. Anything to jump back in there and get back in your life. And the thing is, you are not obligated to respond. Don't respond. What will happen if you don't? Don't respond.
Yeah. You can use NEB even, if there's no, necessarily abuse going on that is active abuse. For people who are trying to kind of hoover you back in, NEB is perfect. If no contact, of course, is perfect. Gray rock is perfect, but NEB is perfect. Okay, yep,
be there at 3. Yeah,
cool.
And it doesn't mean that you don't want to. I know me and my best friend, we have a thing. Say if we want to say something that's not super great or friendly, we'll text it to each other, right? And we'll get it out of our system, and that'll be it. I will. So it's you're getting. It doesn't mean that you're not frustrated or angry or have something to say. But just don't say it to the partner, because, like you said, it can and will be used against you. So you do not want to have any trace of that. And the goal is to get you to break, to crack, to say something, to do something so that they can use it against you. That's the whole
Anything
point.
You say can and will be used against you.
And it's not that they care about you so much, or they miss the kids so much, or they love you so much. It's about power and control. And once you remember that, you can begin to assess it and take your power back. No, you cannot, like you talked about, stop the legal things from happening, but you can start to learn how to control your emotions in those spaces. So I want to go to never assess patterns. I love it. You know how we feel about calling somebody a narcissist, or calling them bipolar, or calling them, whatever. It's the judge is not, they're not going to diagnose them. They're on the spot. It doesn't matter. So when you say never assess patterns, do you mean never diagnose them in that way? Or are you saying can we talk about things that they've done? Well, they don't pick up the children on time, or they don't,
So what I mean is like never assess. And what I mean by assess is, so a diagnosis is a diagnostic, there's a diagnostic tool. It is an assessment that is done. We are not going to assign diagnostic labels to people. So what I mean by is never assess the patterns. So, and what I mean by that is like, if there's a pattern of never picking the children up on time, that's the thing, is that they never pick the children up on time, like period, end. Assessing that would be, they never pick up children on time because they're a bipolar alcoholic.
Yeah.
Don't give an assessment. And if anything, I mean, I usually see when people start in there and you see the dueling narcissists, the looking at each other and calling each other narcissists. I see judges that are like, I don't want to even want this in my courtroom. And I don't necessarily blame them, because it's really confusing, because then you're like, who do I believe? What's going on? They're calling each other this or that, Now, over time, you can start to see what's going on and who the abuser is and who the victim is. But judges don't have time. You're in front of them for maybe 5 minutes, maybe an hour. So, and think of like, did it take you 5 minutes or an hour to see that the person was abusive? No, it took you years, so it's going to take them longer than a half an hour. So that's what I mean by assess. Like, don't assign a diagnostic label, don't assess it. Just talk about the behavior. They never pick up the children on time. They skipped Saturday's appointment. They haven't been taking them for appointments. They have unmedicated ADHD. That's it. Stuff like that.
Focus. I wrote it down too, and I emphasized it. I was like, focus on the behavior and
focus on
the behavior, and kind of like disassociate yourself from the feelings of however you feel about them, because it's not relevant. The judge is not there about your feelings; they're there for facts, and you have to prove it. Yep.
And I know it's hard. You all could be like, it sounds cold to say that. It sounds so cold to be like the judge doesn't care, but you have to understand, like, they have. I mean, the docket is how many pages long, and it's not about feelings in a court of law. Now, in our field, it's so different, because our field it's all about feelings. So it is hard to make that shift. But in a courtroom, it isn't about that. It isn't about feelings. It's about figuring out, like, what it is that happened and proving that. And you're not going to prove it by assigning labels, and it's going to make you look vindictive if you get up there and you're like, oh, she's bipolar. Because what does that mean, bipolar? I mean, most people don't really know what that means, and the judges, I've heard judges say, oh, are you, a psychotherapist now? Like,
right. And now instead of focusing on the patterns, you're not talking about what a bipolar disorder is. So,
and you've lost them.
You've lost them. So I want to take a few minutes to talk about the impacts of it on a survivor of abuse, because it can be so hard. It can be so difficult to process. Hey, from Hawaii. It can be really, when you jump in, let us know where you're tuning in from. Hey, from Hawaii, aloha.
Hey, from Hawaii, aloha.
It could be really difficult to process, and you just feel like you're constantly getting beat up. It feels like the never-ending story. It feels like you're never going to win. It feels like the abuser is constantly winning. And it can be super duper exhausting. Yes. What would you say? I mean, just to a survivor who's just trying to survive after abuse, and they're experiencing post-separation abuse.
So the thing I want to say first is just take it day by day. And I know that sounds like, oh no, like, what do you mean? I understand. I remember being there and being like, I want some like magic wand or some magic phrase that my therapist would say to me, saying, this is, do X, Y, Z, and it'll go away. And I understand that, but just focus on today. Just focus on, what are you going to have for breakfast, making sure you're eating breakfast, making sure you're drinking water, making sure you're getting rest. Or, do you need to work? Do you need to pick up the kids? Just focus on today. Prepare for the next, if you have a court date or child custody hearing, prepare for that. Don't prepare for 3 hearings down. Let your lawyer do that. If you have a lawyer, don't do that, because then your brain is living 6 months from now, and you're in that constant hypervigilant state. You're in that constant state of anxiety, and then you're going to start to have insomnia, have flashbacks, and things like that. And it's a really stressful time anyway. So giving your brain some time to just come to the here and now. And I know it sounds impossible. I remember when my therapist said, oh, do mindfulness in the here and now. And I was like, There's no way. But you do need to give your brain just a little bit of time, like just focusing on, okay, have I showered? Have I had dinner? Like just, I mean, the basic stuff.
Yeah, that's really good. Hey, Nikki. Hey, darling. She said day by day, one step at a time.
Yes.
You know, you think about finding joy, find times in your day to have joy, right? Whether it's with your kids or by yourself, find pockets of joy, because their goal is to steal that joy and that peace from you, right?
Yeah.
And so I think part of the empowering process in that is finding your peace, finding your joy. And I love that you say day by day, because it does sound crazy, right? Because you know you have all this stuff coming up.
I get it, y'all. I do.
But you can only control so much. And I love how you talk about the anxiety and the hypervigilance, because you're like, oh my gosh, in 6 months I have this. What about today? Right? And so I love how you talk about taking the time to eat breakfast, taking the time to take a moment for yourself. What does that look like for you? You know, and it sounds simple,
your body,
but their goal, right, is to rob you of that. Right?
Yes. And I remember when my therapist said that to me, it was like a curtain lifted. She was like, Kaytee, that's what they want, is for you to be suffering and not sleeping, unable to eat, not enjoy life, feeling that's exactly what they want, is they want you to be miserable. And to me, it didn't dawn on me, because I was like, I would never want another human being to be miserable. But it was like a curtain lifted, and I was like, oh, that completely makes sense. And so I use that, and I give that forward to my clients, like, take your power back. You know, no one can decide to not feeling anxious or hypervigilant. Yeah. But you're just taking it day by day, like fueling your body. Have you had water today? Staying hydrated. Yeah. That kind of stuff.
I love that you talked about how the veil lifted when you realized that. And I always tell survivors too, like, they've robbed you enough. They've taken so much from you. You found the strength to escape. You found the strength to get away. Do not give them the opportunity to rob another minute of your peace.
Don't let them have that much power.
No,
I know
your power.
I know it's hard.
Yeah, and it definitely is hard, but it takes moment by moment, and like intentional actions. I love walks on the beach when they go on the beach. I love to do this. Let me do this. Let me find pockets of joy. Let me, take my kids swimming. Let me do something, because
go get ice cream with the kids.
Yeah, they want your mind to be running constantly about them and what they're gonna do next. What if you just lived in the moment, even if it's just for that moment, because they're gonna continue doing it. So in that moment, if you get yourself some peace and some joy, I would encourage that, taking your power back in that moment.
Because, and not living in the what ifs.
Yeah.
Because what happens is post-separation abuse is like, you're constantly like, what next? What next? Every knock on the door is a citation. Every knock on the door is a child custody hearing. Every time the phone rings, it's the DA, about being served for this or that. It's constant, every time the school calls, we got to complain about this or that. Take back some of that power of not letting yourself be constantly living in the what if, because it's like re-traumatizing just in and of itself.
I think too, having honest conversations with yourself about what the truth is.
Yes.
Because their goal is to distort the truth. Oh, you never take care of the kids, or they're always dirty, or you never pay, you can't afford, all these things.
Yeah, and you'll never be able to afford them without me. That's a common one.
Have conversations like, I can do this. I am a good parent, or I'm a good father. I can do these things.
Yes.
I can hold a job. I can go, have these honest conversations, because oftentimes you're so bombarded with the negativity and the false lies that you hold. Tell the truth to yourself. Yes. They don't have to believe it, but tell the truth to yourself.
And it is so important, being a good parent doesn't mean being a perfect parent. Like, I'll have clients that will say, I mean, but it's true. I did send him to school with 2 different socks. And I'm like, so? Like, like, what? I mean, you're dealing with? I'm glad he was at least wearing socks. Like,
hello. Okay, because my daughter went to school today with 2 different socks. And I was like, listen, she has socks on. I have bigger fish to, like, that's not going to be a problem. But what the abuser will do, and I love that you brought that up, but like, see, she doesn't take the time with the children.
Use that against you.
They went to school with 2 different socks.
Yeah.
Wrangling a kid over some socks, dressed in lies until you're left naked with the truth. Wow.
Yeah.
I
like that.
Yeah, I do too. 3 years is a long time, and so that's a great, Jennifer, for my next question for you.
3 years.
Well, and does it ever end, do you think?
Oh my
Do
gosh.
you
So,
think that it ever ends?
so yes and no. Are there situations where a person just like, so I like to say most of the time it does start to kind of fade away. It'll get further and fewer between. How do you say that?
Fewer and
further between. Yeah.
No. Yeah.
Fewer and further between. So instead of maybe getting citations every month, maybe you're getting them every 6 months. Maybe 2 years go by and you have, some joy for a while. So it does get fewer and further between. They eventually do kind of get bored. Usually when the kids get, and I wouldn't even say 18, but usually when the kids get almost like 20 to 25, like college age, I'll see them kind of back off then because they can't use them as much as pawns. It doesn't mean they won't try. I mean, kids are stuck in the middle of that triangulation at any age, but it does start to get a little bit better. But what ends up happening is you get better with it. So instead you'll get that citation and you'll be like, okay, like, all right, let me do X, Y, Z. And I'm not saying it's not stressful and I'm not saying it's not like, horrible, but you will start, maybe you won't lose 3 nights of sleep this time when you get the citation, or maybe this time when they make the complaint to the school about you sending them with dirty socks and how that means you're a bad mom, maybe this time you won't hang your head in shame when you go into the school. Maybe this time you'll be able to brush it off. So you'll notice things like that before you'll notice, oh, they've backed off. And sometimes they happen at the same time, but I always tell people, prepare for it not to stop. Hope that it will, prepare that it won't, but just empower yourself. So that way, when it does start to happen and when it does continue, or, sometimes I have clients that are like good for 5 or 10 years, and then their kid turns 18, and then it's, I don't know if they look and they see all the years that they've had to pay child support and they feel resentful. I don't know, but all of a sudden they get like this last, I'm going to stick it to you now. Little Susie just turned 18, so you're going to get it now. So, sometimes, but then by then, they've had so many internal coping mechanisms that they're like, this is annoying, but I know how to handle this and I've handled it before, and I'm going to be okay.
I think one of the things to remember too is that you can't control them. You couldn't control the abuse. Like even when you're in the abusive relationship, I just want them to stop the abuse. I just want them to stop the abuse. You couldn't control that. Recognizing that maybe has given you the strength to escape, to leave the relationship. Understand it's the same thing outside of the relationship. You still cannot control what they do.
Yes.
So in the relationship, you couldn't control them. You could control if you decided to stay or go.
And I know in the moment, like we like to think that we could, because we were like, oh, if only the house was cleaner, or if only I just never traveled and left the house, or if only the kids were like always quiet, then they won't get angry. So we do kind of like have this automatic, like, if only, and it's not the same. Like you can't always be like, I'm never going to send the kids to school again with dirty socks. And then they'll never again call the school and make a complaint about me. You can't live your life like that. You have to live your life and let them be their own demise.
Yeah. People often say like, I just want revenge, or I just want them
I understand.
Like, yeah, we get it. We do. But what I say? Some of the best revenge is you live in your entire best life.
Is healing. The best revenge is healing.
Absolutely. You can never get them back for what they did to you, and if you think about the way that they've hurt and destroyed you, and you said it earlier, you talk about, I would never treat another human being like that.
Never treat another human being that way. Yes.
And that's our healthy thought.
And to me, that's my revenge, because I'm knowing that I'm not a malicious person, not a perfect person, but I'm not malicious. Like, knowing that I would never do something like that. And so to me, like, the best revenge is healing. Yes. And the best revenge is, I work with clients every day on like ways to, we talk about forgiveness. And the first thing I talk about when I'm talking about forgiveness is forgiving yourself. Yeah. Forgiving yourself for not seeing red flags, forgiving yourself for seeing them and then excusing them, forgiving yourself for choosing the person, forgiving yourself for putting your children through that. Yeah. And then if the rest of everything, comes naturally, a lot of people like turn to whatever it is that they think, many of my clients are like, my higher power is going to handle them. That's my revenge, Yeah. Find something that gets you through needing, because if you're still in the wanting revenge, that's a normal part of the healing process.
It is.
You're not getting. Mm-hmm.
It is definitely a part of it. You know, it's interesting. We talked about getting like revenge and stuff like that, or not wanting the other person to be another human being treated like that. Oftentimes, the abuser will say, "You're the narcissist," and you're like,
Oh,
"I have
yes.
to." Do you think I'm a narcissist? Do
You
you
all,
think I'm
that's
a
so
narcissist?
common.
It's so funny, and it's like, if you wouldn't even want anybody else to be treated like that, you don't even have to consider that you're the
If
narcissist.
you
Like, it's not a thing.
if you have the insight to come and say, "Am I a narcissist?"
Right.
Then, like, first of all, narcissism exists on a spectrum. You know, for dangerous people are way over here, and then most people are kind of, but if you have the intellect to be able to say, or the insight to be able to say, "Am I a narcissist?" and to be able to really reflect on it, then probably you're not like the narcissist.
And that's the line they use all the time. You're the real narcissist. I'm out now. And so they start to question themselves. Maybe I'm the abuser. Maybe it's me.
I know. And that is a part of the cycle. That is so common. It is so common. I tell people to expect it. It's not if they call you the narcissist, it's when. So that way, when they do it, you can be like, okay, there's the thing Kaytee told me to
I knew it was gonna come.
Yeah, there it is. Like,
so Betty Ann, you're right. What Kaytee said is perfectly right. Healing is the best revenge. And I truly believe that as you heal and you find your joy, like I think there's something to be said about finding your own personal peace and inner joy, because no one can take that from you. No matter what happens around you, like that's your own personal joy. The world, a tornado could be happening in a hurricane, but once you've healed and you found that peace within yourself, it's not saying perfection, but it just means that Kaytee can't come and take my joy and I can't go take hers because it's personal.
Exactly.
No one gave it to her, and so healing is a part of that process. And the goal of the abuser is to like, okay, he left me, she left me. I'm going to make their life hell. You can still continue on your healing journey after leaving. Is it more challenging? Yes.
Yes.
Is it climbing up a rocky mountain? Yes. But you can absolutely do it. So
it is climbing up a rocky mountain without any of the one of those poles to get you any climbing gear.
Yep. And that's why I love your book. I'm a fan of your writing. I think you do great work. Psychology Today blog has your writing. You write for Invisible Bruises is the name of it. So that's her second book. First book is Invisible Bruises. Second one is this post-separation abuse book. Hi, Karen. How are you? Protecting your peace is a superpower. It absolutely is a superpower that they do not want you to have. And so it's like protecting yourself in a way where it's like a cocoon where you don't allow them to take your peace, really anybody to take your peace anymore. So that's really important. Does anybody have any questions before I let Kaytee go? You can grab her book on, let me see if I can put it up real quick. It is not high conflict. It's post-separation abuse on Amazon. And that is her website. Let me see. So I have a question. What do you do when the abuser is using your children to control you post-abuse? What are some empowerment tactics or strength tools that you would suggest for them? I know we talked about not like going back and forth about the negative talk, but is there anything else?
So with the kids, keep everything age appropriate. So your conversation with a 3-year-old is going to be different than what it would look like for the 17-year-old. And so, kids will say things like, oh, well, usually daddy makes my scrambled eggs in the morning. Yep, usually daddy does, but this morning is going to be mom. And that's it. Don't get into like, yeah, well, dad's a jerk and he did this. Because it doesn't matter. Even if it's the truth, it doesn't matter, because it'll always come back to bite you if you're like purposefully trying to turn someone against them. My first thing that I should have said first is to seek legal advice whenever there are children involved that are minors, because depending on your state and depending on if you've been legally married, and if not, like if both of you are considered, I know in some states it's different, if kids are adopted and stuff like that. So please seek legal advice with kids first and foremost, but really really get your support, get a therapist, get a coach, get someone who really specializes in this form of abuse, because there are going to be days where you want to come home and you just want to pull your hair out and you want to scream and you want to just, be like, I give up. And I understand that. And so, get someone that you can call and you can, scream about them and you can yell about them and you can say all the things that you would never say in court, all the things that you don't want to say to your lawyer, and really focus on, what is the best thing for the children? Focus on the children, focus on, today I'm going to put the paperwork aside and I'm going to take them and we're going to go down to the farm and get ice cream and milk cows or whatever. Focusing on like, what is it that I can do today just to have 5 or 10 minutes? Because you're never going to look back and regret, oh, I really shouldn't have spent those 10 minutes with little Johnny getting ice cream.
That's good.
You will look back and say, oh, I really shouldn't have spent, those 10 minutes kind of venting about Johnny's father. And things will happen. You're not perfect. We are not perfect. But you can't have it be something that piles up and piles up.
And they want to control your emotions. And so in the moments where you could be having joy, their goal is to steal that. When you could be having moments with little Billy, they're trying to steal that. So
they don't want you to be happy taking little Billy to get ice cream. They want you to be miserable, losing sleep, burning the dinner you forgot it on the stove. They want you to be like that. So no, try to take some of that power back of like, I am not going to let my power as a mom be diminished.
And these moments, I love how you said you'll never regret spending time with the children or doing something or taking that trip or doing things. It's really important that you take those moments, because there's going to be post-separation abuse. You're going to have to prepare for maybe another court date or another hearing. In these moments, don't let them rob that from you too.
You're never going to be like, oh, I shouldn't have taken him to the water park.
And those are moments, even when I think back when I left, my kids were 2 and 3 and they're 15 and 16 now. And I look at them, I'm like, we had moments and it was rough. Like mama didn't have any money. It was rough, but it was the joy that we found in the simplest things. Which is really, really important. And there are days where I had to give him the children for custody and I cried myself to sleep, but it was, you still work through those moments and realize it's not always going to be like that. They will be back, and so when you have them, you love them and you care for them. And then and another thing, I think we talked about in one of our other lives, is you can't control what they do when they're with another partner. So don't try to. And
know that it's okay to be upset. Like if you drop the kids off and you sob the whole way home listening to Alanis Morissette or whatever, like please do that. Like my clients are always like, they feel guilty that they cry. And I'm like, no, please, like get it out. Please experience the emotions. Like,
And I also always encourage them to like, oh, okay, so they have to go to the other parent for the weekend or for the week. What are you doing? Right?
Yes.
What are you gonna do? Go get your nails done. Go see your girlfriend. Go hang out or do something. Do something that brings you joy. Because first of all, they'll be back, right? And they'll be back, running around all over the house and tearing the place up. And you'll be tired. So in these moments when you're by yourself, even though it hurts, right? Find something that you might enjoy doing for yourself. Because oftentimes it's so selfless to what we do every day. And just take time for yourself. So I agree, Betty. Having a sponsor or an outlet is really, really important. Yeah. And that person is not your attorney. It is definitely not the judge, and it is definitely not the children. So finding an outlet, and it's definitely not. It needs to be someone that you trust, that is not a flying monkey, who is not necessarily going to take this information back.
Yes, make sure it's someone who is not a mutual friend. Make sure, that's why I say family. I say like mom. Like for me, it was my mom. I could call my mom. Have a best friend, a sister, brother, whatever.
It's really important. I love talking about the energy in the house, and I think that I know exactly what you mean. Like this is our space. Like I don't have to live with my abuser anymore, and I don't care if it's a 5 by 5 foot apartment or a 5,000 square foot house. What happens in this house is going to be peace and joy, because we get to control the temperature of what happens in this house now. They don't run the thermostat now. We do. And I always tell moms too, like your kids are feeding off of that energy that we have. And so it's so important. It's so important that we change the temperature when we arrive in the atmosphere that we want to create for our children. Yep. Even if they come home from like a visit with the abuser or their other parent, like we get to change it to, how was you? Okay, great. Love you, missed you, glad you're home. We're back to our space, Yeah. And yes, you do vent to me, Nikki, anytime. I love it.
No, please have someone that you can vent to. And I like that word sponsor, because I'll actually use that word with clients. Like have a sponsor, have a person you can text all of the like petty, immature, like, oh, his mustache was like full of like cigarette smoke, and like all the petty stuff that you would never, don't say it to anyone else. Don't post it on social media. Don't say it to mutual friends, because it does look immature and petty. But have like your person that you can text and be like, oh, he wore that shirt I hated or whatever. Just stuff just to get it out.
we're petty, we're emotional, you know, we
Just
have things to say.
one
Just
person versus like an entire, you know, don't post about them on social media. That's what I always say,
be
especially
very
kids, don't post about them on social media. Even if you think your Facebook's private, don't post about them on social media. If you have any shared kids, any shared asset, anything, don't.
If it's on social media, Canon will be used against you in the court of law. No, I just made it up, but probably will. All right, you guys, thank you so much for hanging with us. Kaytee, thank you so much. You're amazing.
Thank you.
I just appreciate your expertise so much. It's just her website, Caitlin Gillis.
Yes, Caitlin Gillis, LCSW.
All right, it wouldn't come out. Also,
thanks, Mom, for the name.
Instagram and Facebook, Clara's, that's 2 underscores on the bottom. Voice. We're starting our post-separation group, and we are going to be using this book. I don't know if you guys can see it as well. So if you don't have it, you can grab it from Amazon. There it is. Thank you.
I can't angle. I don't know why I can't angle. There we go.
And then the book before that she has is Invisible Bruises, so you can grab them both. I see it on Amazon. They're available as a bundle. And this is when abusers weaponize the courts as a form of retaliation. Thanks for hanging us with us, you guys. Hold on, let me go back over here and see real quick. Hi, Dylan. Thank you both. Okay, awesome. Bye, you guys. We'll see you later.